Hey everybody, this is Dream, and today we have a nice little 4-game Major League Baseball slate. Before I get started, can you guys smash that like and subscribe button? It really does help the channel a lot. Really do appreciate it. With that said, let's go ahead and get into the slate. Sorry for being a little bit late today, but we should have a pretty interesting slate today. We do have one weather concern, the Texas-Baltimore game. It does have a pretty decent chance that there's going to be some rain, but it should be a game that we get in, or at least get most of the game in. So I think that'll be fine. However, it is a small slate. Pitching is kind of crazy today, and we'll get into that in here in just a second. But make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Really does help the channel a lot. Really do appreciate it, guys. So let's go ahead and get into this one. So let's start with our pitchers. So Glass now is the top overall play on this slate. His price is nuts, but he's been over. He's got 35 fantasy point upside. He has 2 subpar games, and the last 11 starts, he's getting tons of strikeouts, and he's got a good matchup here against San Francisco. He's got absolutely the best matchup. That's why his price is so high. But he's definitely somebody that can do well here, so he's definitely worth being a core play, especially. Now, you can definitely go away from him as a contrarian play, but man, pitching is kind of rough outside of him. So let's look at the other pitchers. Pablo Lopez looks very interesting today. He's a high-risk, high-reward play for Minnesota, but he's got a good matchup here, as Seattle is the weaker team of these two teams, and he has a decent K rate here, so he's got good upside. So since he played Seattle on the 9th of last month, he's had 5 subpar games and 3 good games. But that said, this matchup is good, and he has good strikeout potential here. So he's got the upside, and he's a good option as maybe the core play if you don't want to use Glass now, or a contrarian GPP play on the slate. Looking at Miller for Seattle, now he's got the tougher matchup against Minnesota, but he's got a pretty good ceiling, though he has struggled a lot in the last several starts. That makes him a GPP play here with 2 really good pitchers on the slate. He's the 3rd best. His strikeout rate is a little bit lower than the top 2 guys, but he's still in play because he has some potential today. Another guy we'll look at is Olsen for Detroit against the Angels. Now, the Angels have been struggling, and he does draw an upside matchup here, though he is really risky because he has a low K rate and a very low floor, but he is capable of decent games. I'm not thinking that he's going to get like a 25 fantasy point game, but if he can get in the 15 to 20 range at this price point, we can handle that. The other guy that we'll look at sort of is Povich for Baltimore. Now, he has a somewhat favorable matchup against Texas. I do like Texas, though, and so he is a Hail Mary play. The schedule has been brutal for him in his 4 starts so far, but he did have one good game against Atlanta, and Texas has struggled this season, so he gets a little bit of it's one of the easier matchups he's had so far. So he does have some potential, but again, the K rate is a little bit risky, and he's very contrarian right now. So he is a Hail Mary play, but he's definitely worth looking at if you're going into penny lineups or anything like that today. So let's go ahead and look at our catchers here. So we really only have 2 guys that have a lot of potential today. That's one being Will Smith of the Dodgers. Now, he's very expensive here, so he's going to be somewhat hard to roster, and he hasn't been all that great. His price is a little bit overpriced, so he is in play, but he's definitely risky here. But the guy I like the most is Cal Raleigh for Seattle. Even though he's got a tough matchup against Lopez, he's been hitting the ball pretty well lately, and he's got home run potential here. Even though he hasn't hit the ball great this season, he does have that potential on the slate. Another guy you could consider, though, as a top ownership option would be Jonah Heim for Texas, as he does have some good potential as well today, but he's high risk, high reward. And a low-owned upside guy is Carson Kelly on the slate. Looking at first base, this position was the deepest position, even including outfield today, so there's a lot of pretty solid options on the slate. Obviously, Ohtani has been absolutely insane lately, hitting home runs a lot. His price point is $7,000. I mean, he's going to be hard to roster, but he's definitely capable, though you could also kick him in the outfield. But I'll also mention that there's plenty of good options at this position that are cheap. One being Ryan Mountcastle. He wasn't in the starting lineup yesterday, or he was in the starting lineup yesterday, but he wasn't expected. He's been a little bit up and down lately. He hadn't had a whole bunch of good games, but he is capable of a solid game, and he has home run upside today, so he's definitely worth a look. Then we'll look at Nate Lowe for Texas. Now, he's an interesting play. He has really struggled with his home runs and stuff this season, but he definitely has that capability today, so he's definitely worth a look, though he's kind of a contrarian option here. Ryan O'Hearn is a good alternative to Mountcastle here. Now, you could also put him in the outfield if you want to stack up Baltimore here, which Baltimore is a very good stack, but I do feel like the team is generally overpriced today. Mark Canha for Detroit is a good one-off play for Detroit as well. Even though he has struggled some lately, he does have good potential on the slate. And then Nolan Chanel for the Angels. He has been pretty good as far as the Angels hitter has been this season, so he definitely draws some utility on the slate, but he's probably one of the only guys on the Angels that I like at all. The top owned guys at this position will be Otani, Mountcastle, and Lowe, and the low owned upside guys are Chanel, O'Hearn, and Canha, so do keep that in mind. But yeah, second base, I do have Marcus Semien as a core play. He is a great core play, but he's just the best option on the slate right now. He's really struggled lately, but he does have home run potential today. I think Texas is a very contrarian team to stack, so it's not a must play by any stretch of imagination. But this position is very weak, and so you're either gonna pay up for him or maybe pay down for Keith, who I'll get to here in a second. But another guy you could look at is Luis Rengifo for the Angels. He's a high risk, high reward play, but he has been hitting the ball pretty solid, and he has good, especially the last few games. He's had 3 straight 2-hit games. He's got some good upside here, and he's got a good batting average, so I think he'll get on base a couple times and help you with some fantasy points. He just isn't a guy that's gonna, have home run potential really. Colt Keith is interesting for the Detroit Tigers because he's dirt cheap, and he's had some good games this season. He is an up and down guy though, so he doesn't have a lot of upside, but he's just cheap enough that you could kind of punt this position if you wanted. As for the top ownership, Keith, Simeon, and then Biggio are probably the top 3 at this position, but I don't really think Biggio stacks out all that well today. Looking at third base, we're going to look at Matt Burling here. Now, he's the only guy that I thought had really good metrics for this slate, so he's at this position. He can also play in the outfield, so you can mix in somebody else here if you really wanted to. But he really is the only guy that I really like here. But I do like, as a top-owned option, Wenzel for Texas. If he does draw the start, he'll be somebody to consider because he is kind of a burner plus play. He doesn't start a lot of games, though, so do keep that in mind. But if he was to be in the starting lineup, he'd be somebody to consider. And so Biggio can also play at this position. A low-owned upside. The low-owned upside guy today is actually barreling, but again, he's not super great. If you have a lot of money left over, though, you could look at Westberg or Lewis, but I mean, they're high risk, high reward on the slate. So let's look at shortstop. Corey Seager jumps off the page as the top overall play at this position. He's hit the ball decently well lately. Has his batting average needs to improve, but he has got some power today. J.P. Crawford is a kind of a contrarian play for Seattle in this one. He doesn't hit the ball all that great, but he has been hitting better lately, and so he does have some nice potential today. The top ownership option today is McKinstry and then Corey Seager, and then there's really nobody that's low-owned upside on the slate. Maybe Gunnar Henderson if you want to, pay up at this particular position. Looking at our outfielders, Otani also fits in here, but Riley Green looks really good for Detroit in this matchup. He's been phenomenal this season, at least for a Detroit Tiger, and he's been on a really good string of good games with hits and stuff. So if he can get it a home run, though, because his price is high, he's definitely capable of that, though, on the slate. Wenzel Perez for Detroit also in play. Even though he has somewhat struggled this season, he's nicely priced here, and he has some good fantasy potential today with home run upside. I like Adolis Garcia. Now, Garcia has struggled for Texas. He's cheaper than he has been in the past, but he definitely has some good upside here. I wish he was a little bit cheaper based on how he's played, but he's getting a lot of hits the last few games, so he definitely draws some good potential on the slate. Andy Pages also looks solid today for the Dodgers, even though he has been inconsistent. He definitely draws home run potential today, so he's definitely worth a look from that perspective. A cheap play here, Robbie Grossman. Now, he has not played a ton of games, or he doesn't start all the games, but when he does start, he does have some potential, and he's been seeing the ball pretty well lately and limiting the strikeouts. Despite his batting average on the season, he does have some good potential today, and he's nice and cheap and helps you pay up, especially if you want to try to fit in Otani or Glasnow here. Wyatt Langford, also interesting for Texas. Again, Texas, they're a very good contrarian stack today. They're a little bit higher risk, high reward, but they definitely fit in okay today. Barreling can play here at outfield as well. And then Luke Raley and Ryan O'Hearn can also play here in outfield as good options. The top ownership at this position, Perez, Grossman, Otani, Pages, and Malloy, and then Green and Kerstad, and then some low-owned upside guys: Verling, Langford, Rayleigh, O'Hearn, and Garcia. So with that said, guys, thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to leave them below.